Underworld Denizens, episode 14.
So, are we mentioning that this is our anniversary episode?
Yeah, we better do that.
We'd better do that somewhere.
And on our episode today, our introductory questions for our regular commentators is, Blood Bowl has a lot of elements. It has obviously the play and the strategy involved in playing the game, but as well, there's also the modeling element of, grabbing miniatures, sometimes converting them, sometimes making them suitable for Blood Bowl when they're not suitable for Blood Bowl originally, or not designed for Blood Bowl originally. So there's that kind of hobbying. If it's the current range of GW miniatures, then you've got to assemble them and put them all together. And then, of course, there's painting. So on that, I want to hear from our regular commentators of all the teams that you've gone through that process of putting all the miniatures together. Which is your favourite out of your collection presently, and why? Millsy, let's jump to you first.
Okay, well, I've got usually a pretty generic answer to this sort of thing. It's usually my latest team. As everyone would know, that the more you paint, the more you sculpt, the more you model, the better you get at it. So it's usually always my latest team.
Some of us buck that trend, Millsy.
But I do actually have to say, if my latest team is the Gnome team, and I'm ecstatic with how the paint jobs came out on that. I had to do a bit of modelling. I think I talked about that last episode when I turned one of the male gnomes into a female, and there was quite a fair bit of filing and scraping and getting rid of a beard and then trying to put a belt buckle on and so on, which I'm pretty proud of and happy with. But if I didn't just go for the default, my latest team, I'd actually have to say my Nurgle team. I painted them up in Miami Dolphins colours, and they just look, coherent as a team. I did swap out. I'm not a fan of the Pestigores that come in the GW box, so I actually swapped them out with GW Beastmen. So I've kept the whole team completely GW, but I'm just really happy with the way that they just come out and they just look like this coherent team.
What about you, Mills?
I'm gonna have a three-part answer there. So the first part is that my painted team that I'm the happiest with to play with is generally my Chaos team, because they seem to fit my playstyle really well. As far as the team that I had the most fun actually doing the painting, it's definitely got to be my old 3rd edition Orcs. The old plastic models and some Hero Quest goblins thrown in just for good flavour, because they just were less of a chore to paint and were a bit more fun to see their character coming out and being a bold and characterful orcs and goblins that they are. But as far as individual miniatures, for my snotlings, I turned my pump wagon into a go-kart, and everyone I've played against and shown it to has really enjoyed the conversion. And it's painted up with just contrast paints just to slap it together, but it actually looks a lot better than it has any right to. So I've sort of cheated a bit there and got multiple answers.
Yeah, my team is actually the same type of team as Millsy. My favourite team in terms of the painting and the final look is actually my Nurgle team. But a bit of a surprise to myself in that normally I quite like fairly vibrant colour schemes of my Blood Bowl teams. I quite like being a bit, not garish, but having very vibrant colours. I don't like that kind of dull and worn and war-torn kind of look that is a very valid painting style, but just not my personal painting preference. I prefer the brighter colours. I like that kind of, alluding to the NFL, which of course that's what Nuffle actually means. It's actually, if you try and say NFL as a word, that's what you end up with. So yeah, all their bright colours and all their, glam and glitz and glamour. And so my colour schemes tend to kind of emulate that kind of idea. But my Nurgle team, I'm really chuffed. And they're an unusual team. They're a bunch of undead dwarves that I turned into my Nurgle team from a game called Confrontation by a company called Rackham. The company's gone bust, but yeah, the miniatures are a bunch of undead dwarves which are stitched together body parts, and the miniatures that I use as the bloaters are actually half caterpillar, half undead dwarves, and yeah, the team just came out really beautifully. Although, ironically, that team has never won best painted team, and I'm somebody who occasionally I do manage to get that, but I'm completely bamboozled as to why some of my teams win best painted and other teams that I think are far superior never do. I just haven't figured it out yet. There's some element to the best painted team that still eludes me, and I'm still struggling and questioning. And maybe it's that my painting style's stuck in the 2010s or something, and I haven't evolved. I don't know. I haven't figured it out. But there you go. Hey, I thought we'd actually just start by going back to something we articulated way back in episode 1, which is one of our focuses of Down Underworld Denizens is to look at the 4 different spheres of, what's going on Blood Bowl around the local scene, and then the state of Queensland, and then across Australia, and then globally. So I thought we'd just spend a bit of time just going through that. So first of all, local league. Wilts, you're our recorder of all results. Do you want to quickly fill us in? We're at the end of round 2, about to launch into round 3. How's that local team going?
Yeah, so we've got a good spread of different teams making up the top 8 currently. Millsy's on top with his Hobgoblin team, which has been fun to watch. Babs' Corn team's had some close tussles, but they're up there as well. I've got my stunty lizards, my skinks running around causing some mayhem. But we've also got orcs, necromantic horror, ogres, my zombies, and lots of halflings, gnomes, and snotlings flying around everywhere as well. So there's definitely a lot of variety in the matchups that are available moving forwards. Plenty more action to come.
Yeah, and it's good to see there's a few new coaches in there too, new to the league. I enjoy playing those people and showing them the ropes as it was, which is kind of good for us because we're playing less than optimal teams. So a new coach coming into the league doesn't have to sort of put up with our monster teams running all over them.
I love the ability to explore different builds in a league setting. So I think I mentioned last episode one of my gnomes has picked up block, even though they will come with wrestle. And my thinking around that is they might occasionally want to actually carry the ball, and so wrestle's not so useful. And my corn team, one of my players has dodge. And my corn team, I've just gone all out and just busted my backside to pick up the blood spawn. So I managed to achieve that after 2 games. I'm pretty happy with that. Got some big winnings coming in thanks to my high fan factor dedicated fans. So yeah.
Don't sleep on it though. One of our new coaches has a halfling running around with Mighty Blow, so he's going to come and get you.
Oh, nice!
Bring it.
Hey, I've got a couple of pro hobgoblins on my all hobgoblin team. The other thing I love about the hobgoblin team is the sneaky stabbers. Like on a chaos dwarf team, they're just way overcosted. But if you're just filling hobgoblins, you've got the cash there to put them in. And they wreak havoc. I've stabbed so many people to death with them. I love them.
Just remember that stabbing doesn't give SPP.
No, it gives me excitement though.
And that's almost as good.
That is.
Now, locally, we had a pretty significant event happen recently. So I put on the Fitzroy Fractal Frenzy Fun Day. Fun Day Frenzy. I don't know, 5X.
Fortress.
Yeah, this one. Let me start again. I put on the Fitzroy Fractal Frenzy Fun Day. I put on
Fractal Fortress Frenzy Fun Day.
You say it. I'll try one
Coming
more
to
time.
an interdimensional portal near you, the Fitzroy
Yes.
Fractal Fortress Frenzy Fun Day.
Yes, perfect. Or Fun Day Frenzy. So we had 10 coaches in the end join us for a day of all kinds of Blood Bowl variants, sevens variants. I thought we'd have a bit of a rundown. So, Will, take us away. Tell us about your thoughts on how the frenzy went. I won't speak because I was tournament organizer.
I'll have a rather biased opinion, obviously, because at the end of the day, there can only be one winner. And unfortunately for Millsy, the countback went to tiebreakers, so Millsy finished second, and the
1 point.
the Wolf Peak Wanderers, the Orc team, held out on top. I did stick with the Orcs because of the way the positioning rules work for the rosters. So Babs has gone with the old Oz Sevens rules, where you have your regular number of positions for everything, but he has allowed rounding up to 1 for big guys and up to 2 for goblins with their big guys, to give them a bit more of a chance, because let's face it, goblins and snotlings need all the help they can get. That doesn't stop them from being fun, but they're not as necessarily competitive, but didn't stop people from taking them. We had some goblins, some snotlings, lots of orcs and black orcs floating around.
Yeah, it was definitely a diverse field of teams present, and I think that's partly because of the different variants and a number of them having a line of scrimmage. So what I was going to say is, we were just saying that we had a really good breakdown of teams. 2 lots of orcs, 2 lots of black orcs, 2 stunties, 1 wood elf, 1 dark elf, 1 Norse, Millsy Slan, and of course, interestingly, I actually think that the wood elf team may have gone undefeated for the day. Which of course would be no surprise to anyone who's played sevens. But the Wood Elf coach was doing really well, but unfortunately, he had to go and only managed 2 games, so he had to withdraw. Then it was on between Millsy and Wilts for top spot. The Wood Elf coach beat me, so my Dark Elf team wasn't in the hunt. I just again just want to commend this Oz Sevens strategy of these variants, because the team build is one method, but also the line of scrimmage means you get, there's actually reasons to play Dwarves and some of these teams that you would never take to, your GW7s. So, I just thought it was really good. And I just wanted to also comment that we had 2 Black Hawk teams, and in some of the variants, like Bridge Bowl and Street Bowl, boy, were they tough. Like, they were very difficult to beat because you couldn't go around them. You were kind of wedged in. I think Dungeon Bowl, similarly, I saw Zach trying to play a Black Hawk team in Dungeon Bowl and was having a huge amount of trouble.
Yeah, well, I played Black Orcs on Bridge Bowl, my first game, and it was actually, funnily enough, Craig was my opponent, and it was his first game ever. Like, his son's joined the league, and he's the box and sort of come along and did it. So, I mean, I coached him a fair bit and said to do this, but then I tried to outcoach myself and still get past it, and I just couldn't do it. They're brutal in confined spaces.
Yeah.
My secret to dealing with trolls in Dungeon Bowl is just to push them onto the teleport pads and get rid of them.
But I mean, I think what it shows is that, actually the decision of taking a Black Orc Sevens team to the Fractal Frenzy was actually an interesting decision, because there was a number of those variants where the Black Orcs really came into their own.
Yeah, and Kathleen was one of the other Black Orc coaches. She's actually signed up for the round 2 of the Bundy Cup, which is coming up in 2 days' time as of recording. And so I reached out and said, "Oh, look, do you need a hand with roster build? Do you need a hand with the team? I've got every team." She's got, no. So she's obviously enjoyed them. Having that line of scrimmage, because Bundy Cup is going to be played on Beach Bowl, having that line of scrimmage with strength 4 or 5 pieces on the line is just, it's devastatingly hard to get past. So that's one of the reasons why I love all of this variants, and I do love the roster build you've got, gone away from what GW have now is any 4 positionals. Back to what GW originally had, was you had to halve the positionals on your team and basically take a half strength positionals and try and fight through with the rest. But it's everybody that was there left with a smile on their face. They were all raging about it, yeah. It was an awesome, fun event, and like to personally thank you for putting it on, Babs.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I think probably the ultimate litmus test of whether it's been a successful day is that a bunch of these coaches that, the Fractal Frenzy was really their first ever tournament, in fact, was their first ever tournament. Well, a bunch of them are rolling up to the Bundy Cup in 2 days' time. So I feel like that's the proof of the pudding. It was a good event.
Yeah, I can't wait to see them, and hopefully I can win my second Bundy Cup.
So let's move on and talk about Queensland at the moment. So in Queensland, we've got quite a busy Blood Bowl schedule. There's actually been 13 registered NAF tournaments scheduled for this year, for 2025. And that doesn't include Millsy's Bundy Cups because they're not NAF registered. It doesn't include the Bundy Rumble coming up in November, though. That is NAF. It's going to be NAF approved. So it's part of our 7th series. So, we've got this really interesting scenario where we've almost got this situation where our Blood Bowl tournaments are going to be hard pressed not to encroach on each other, because there's a bunch of tournaments, maybe even 3 or 4 of them wanting to start next year, and as I said, we've had 13 this year, so it's a really interesting scenario where how do we juggle all this interest in tournaments? Are we kind of being a victim of our own success, or is it a situation we're going to get some natural attrition, or is it all going to coexist nicely because there's just vast distances between them? Yeah, it's a really difficult situation we're in, but I think it's a result of something enormously popular. We've had great success with a bunch of tournaments, and now there's lots and lots and lots of them.
Yeah, and one of those, like we kicked off the year at the Brisbane City Bash, and after that event, so Dylan, the organizer of that, and then we've interviewed him on the podcast before. He got asked to do a little event at one of the cons, so BrisCon, which he went and put ahead. And then since then, he's actually been asked to do another one. But probably the best thing, and I know we're getting kind of a bit of bloat here. We're getting too many tournaments, but one of the things that he did was he reached out to our community and said, "Hey, I've got a chance to put this on. What does everyone think?" So, we've jumped on there and said, "Yeah, maybe this, maybe that," and he's taken it on board. So, and I'm sure that every other TO would do the same. We listen to our community and say, not now, or here's a better time for it. So I love the fact that we got 13. I think it's getting too many maybe, but I also love the fact that we all work and play well with each other.
Yeah, well, obviously we want to aim for that, and I think we'll have a strategy in place to do that. But I just think it is one of the things you should do if you're thinking about running a Blood Bowl tournament, that you should actually reach out to the local Blood Bowl community of that region and say, "Hey, what else is on around about this time? What can we do?" I think it's one of the things you should have in your little list to do if you are thinking about starting a tournament, is actually just having a look at the calendar and seeing what other events are on and around you. And I think we've managed to end up in a situation where we're piloting the tournament series in Queensland this year, and we've only got a limited number of tournaments in both the 11s and the 7th series, but we plan to really widen that up next year. But we do want to make sure that they've got good spacing as much as possible. And so just getting all the tournament organisers to chat to each other and do that. Hey, and so that's not a bad segue to lead into, Wilt, do you want to give us a bit of a rundown as to what's going on in our 2 tournament series?
Yep. So for the current standings, so starting off with the Queensland 11 series, we've only had our first 2 tournaments so far, and we're coming up on the 3rd for Fumble in the Jungle at the end of the month up in sunny Cairns. But at the current standings, we've got Roy Quilty edging out Andrew Rogers at the very, very top. We've got Pete Sinclair and Kiltane Quilty and myself coming up after that. And then we've got Dave Lieber and Ken Dunford rounding out the sort of top 8 at the moment, with Renton Wright, who won the Brisbane City Bash with his Lizardmen. There's lots of other people who've got their names on the list. including a few out of towners from New South Wales and Victoria, and
It's interstate.
yeah. So there's plenty of interest. We've had a good number of people going to every event so far, which will change after the end of the month. But we do have Dino Matthews and a few other guys travelling up to Cairns, which will be good to see, and good for the Cairns guys to see them and their level of competition as well.
Yeah, in that top 10 to 12, you've actually got a bit of clustering going on. So Wilts, you and Kiltane are tied in fourth and fifth spot. And then there's a cluster of 4 coaches on 22 points, including friend of the show, Rabbit. James Russell Wills is sitting on 22 points with 3 others, including Orc Rock, aka Ken Dunford.
And moving on to the sevens, where we've actually had 4 out of our 6 events already run for the year. We actually have Aidan G from Townsville as a number 1 spot. Millsy's actually running second at the moment with not too much separating him. We've got Sam Beard and Kelly G also in the hunt, and I'm in 5th place currently, but I'm chasing it. We'll see how many more events I can get to. We've got Jared O'Brien from Cairns and Babs in there as well. Pete's holding it down with just the one score so far, but he's still in the hunt with 1 more. And we've got plenty of people excited to keep coming to new events every so often.
Yeah, including young Chris Tattersall there is actually holding down 10th spot in the sevens, and I know he's actually keen to the Bundy Rumble. So put a call out for everyone while I'm here for the Bundy Rumbles. It'll be 2-day, 8-game beach bowl event in November. So hopefully they can all come except for Aidan G because he's my closest competitor. So Aidan, if you'd like to stay up there in Townsville,
I'd like to see him get down there and give you a real push for your money.
Oh, I'd love to go head to head with him. That would be brilliant.
But I love the fact that we've managed to achieve that there's a number of tournaments up north and a number of tournaments down south. And so, Wilts and Kelly G are tied on points, but they've not been to one event in common in the sevens calendar
so far.
Yeah. But isn't that great? Isn't that fantastic? Not that you've not been a tournament together, but the fact that you've got people competing up north and you've got people competing down south, and they're on equal footing. I think that's brilliant. That's something we want to aim for in Queensland.
Just while we're talking tournaments, I just want to give a quick plug to 3 tournaments. The first is the Big V. Now, you might think it doesn't need a plug, but for those who may be listening in and aren't well connected to any of our online communities, the Big V is Australia's biggest tournament. Eucalyptus Bowl is vying for that title, but Big V still holds it, and it is going to be massive once again this year, slightly earlier this year than last year, and they have the Nippers team up for pre-order. So that's a team that is suitable to play as halflings. Some amazing sculpts by Christian Schwager, where instead of being halflings, they're actually street kids or kids from the beach in kind of leftover bits of equipment. Fantastic team. Have a look around online. Go to the Big V store. Get your pre-order in. Final days. Second event for promoting is the Sunny Coast Slam, 9th and 10th of August. There's only about 6 tickets left for that. They've capped it at 56 and they're getting very close to that number. So make sure you get your ticket if you haven't been onto that already. And the third event I want to promote really quickly is the Saints Death Row 11s. If you haven't heard of that tournament before, that's because it's brand new. It's Townsville's first 11s event, and I'm pumped for that, and I'm going to see if I can make it up there.
Now, I'm going to make an interesting comment here. Just looking at the calendars that we've got on our screens for South Australia, Victoria, and New South Wales for comparative purposes for their lineup of tournaments. If you have a really close look at them, there's a number of tournaments on all 3 calendars that are actually only 1-day events. So is there space for 1-day 11s events in Queensland, and how would that change up the way the calendar pans out?
Yeah, I think there is a place for them. I think you just got to realise that one day tournaments, people generally speaking won't travel quite as far for. Uh, Though that said, you've got tournaments like the Jolt Cup down in the ACT. It often gets a few coaches from Sydney for, but you just don't get people travelling, for like they do for a full weekend event as a general rule of thumb.
Well, the other option is, do you then put on 4 games in one day, or even make it a big stretch, make 5 games in one day, so that you've got that second day to get home, but you still feel like you're putting it on a big event?
I think my brain would be fried doing 5 11s games in one day. 5 7s is fine.
You could get to 4 maybe, but
Yeah, I've attended 4. I've attended a one-day 4 games event. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I know, like Babs mentioned the jump in the ACT. The other one we held, it's a bit of a last minute thing. It was actually called the Last Minute Krampus Rush that we put on for Ian, not the porn guy, McKinley from Eye of Nuffle. We put that on in December last year, and we actually managed, quite a few people come from down south. But the real thing that hooked them in was it was using the same rule set as a big upcoming tournament. So if you're wanting to attract people to a one-dayer, maybe give them a rule set. It's like, okay, Eurobowl coming up, let's mimic that, or the ASC is coming up, let's mimic that, and give them another reason for attending.
Yeah, but I think it does show, as Wilt said, we've got these well-established Blood Bowl communities like Victoria and New South Wales who have, and South Australia for that matter, who have got 8 tournaments, 7 tournaments, 6 tournaments, and here's Queensland with 13. Like it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens in Queensland over the next few years. I for one think, as long as we're being careful not to crowd each other out. Look, more Blood Bowls, more better, right? But we just got to be careful about how we do it, and hopefully we can manage to do that without blood on the floor. You save that for the pitch.
And then, of course, the interesting thing will be with the amount of Blood Bowl that we're playing, which seems to be exceeding the other states on average. Let's see how well that translates to improved quality of play across the board for our Ozbowl state team in September.
Yeah, and the scary thing first, Babs, is not only do we have 13 tournaments in Queensland, but there's quite a few of us that are actually doing some interstaters and internationals as well. So there's quite a few Queenslanders that not only participate in these 13, but they get down to the Big V. They're going to Eurobowl this year. Eurobowl massive. I think it's over 150 entrants at the moment. And then, to top that off, there's ASC coming up in our next holiday break. So it's not just the 13 in Queensland that we're looking at. We're looking at further afield as well.
I was also going to say, let's just pause for a moment and just chat briefly about, if you're thinking about putting a tournament on, I don't care where you are, anywhere in the world, what steps should you take to get your tournament, up and running? It's just worthwhile touching base. And I mentioned reaching out to the local community, but the other person you should definitely have a chat to is the regional tournament coordinator for your area. So in Australia, that's James or Rabbit. If it's in New Zealand, it's hang on, this is going to come to me. Claymore. So yeah, reach out to your local regional tournament coordinator and just sound out with them, because they can save you a bucket load of work. They can say, hey, go here and look at this rule set. This rules pack is something you can adjust. They can clue you on to people who might be able to attend, where to promote it to. There's a whole bunch of stuff they can give you a hand with. So just want to really just encourage you to make sure you're well connected with your Blood Bowl community and your NAF local rep.
Yeah, and just adding to that, James is our local rep here in Australia, but reaching out to him and say, hey James, I'm looking at putting this on. James is actually also, he's pretty knowledgeable, and he knows which other tournaments are around that time in Queensland, because he's, he might be approving those for NAF registrations and so on. So just talking to that NAF rep, they might be able to let you know which other events are close to yours as well.
Yeah, they might even be able to suggest, where you can go to get some swag or some prizes. maybe point you the way at Tats Tabletop and say, hey, this guy's a one-stop shop. You can get your 3D printed teams and some dice all in the one-stop shop.
Beat me to it there, Babs.
So what I want to do now is introduce a brand new segment to Down Underworld Denizens. We've talked about having this segment for a while. We want to have a segment on Down Underworld Denizens where you want to understand that what we're talking about now is something that you want to take with a grain of salt. You want to actually put your filters on, because this segment is called Campfire Yarns. Now, there's a great Aussie tradition that when the men of the bush got together around a bushfire, one of the things they would do around a campfire, one of the things they would do is they'd tell stories, and these stories often were, shall we say, exaggerated, and their truth was perhaps dubious sometimes, and so in that kind of time-honoured tradition of the men of the land getting around a campfire. While their damper cooked and while their billies boiled, and telling each other some tall tales, or shaggy dog stories as they were known. We want to actually talk about something pretty interesting, and we're not the first person to discover this. Actually, a bit of a shout out to Get the Ref podcast. Get the Ref podcast found a leak. They found this leak on 4chan. It was pointed out to them by one of their listeners, one of their community. There was an anonymous 4chan poster who actually put up some pretty interesting comments about basically what they're claiming is an update about what Games Workshop is doing with Blood Bowl. And in particular, they want to claim that Blood Bowl is going to be released in September this year, and they gave some very specific details about what that's going to look like. So things like the release schedule for Blood Bowl post this new box set coming out in September is going to go to 3 teams a year rather than 2 teams a year, which is what the current cycle seems to be. The rumour refers specifically that the Chaos Dwarf and Gnome release were deliberately tailored and designed to test the market, and they were pleased with the results of that test. The rumour mentions that 2 other Chaos teams are going to be released within 12 months of the new box set, and also that there's going to be a double drop of teams within 6 months of the box set actually dropping. Maybe 12 months of the box dropping, and that double drop of 2 teams at once is going to be Orcs and High Elves from the river. So there's really, really interesting detail in this rumour. Some of it seems to be quite casual in nature. So it talks about how wildly inaccurate was recommended to move from occurring from the thrower to occurring from the recipient of the throw, and that Andy Davo was one of the people who convinced them that. So it's kind of very chatty, and kind of saying don't get too tied to tackle on your dwarf lineman, things like that. And then there's other bits of the rumour that seem really, really specific. Like there seems to be a specific release schedule mentioning months of releases, like that Death Zone's going to be released on this particular month. It's quite a full-on claim. The question is it true or is it not? Mills, you've had a read. What do you think?
Yeah, I listened to the same podcast, and we probably came up together and said, hey, this is, there's a bit of truth in this, or there's a bit of guts to the rumor. Just the way that the rumor was put out there, like it was very specific, talking about things like in 3rd quarter we're going to do this, 4th quarter do this. So it sounded like like boardroom speak about this is what we're going to do. So that was the thing that sort of made me sit up and go, hang on, this, there might be some leaks to this rumor, and if it's true, I'm really happy, looking forward to it. But there was quite a lot in there that it made sense as well. So I'm going to put it out there right now. If someone made this rumor up and just put it up there, man, they got some brains about it, because it sounds like it sounds like it has to be true, just the way that it was put to us. What do you reckon, Will?
Some of the language they've used in some of the places definitely holds to what you might expect to see from corporate memos or messages among staff. But some of it definitely breaks that sort of formatting and seems a bit more forced. So I think, are they trying to embellish it and oversell it a bit more than they have to? There's always a possibility of that. Obviously, anytime there's rumours or news of a new edition coming out, some people are going to get upset at change just for the sake of change. Some people want change just for the sake of change, just to stir things up a bit and make it less stale and boring. Obviously, time will tell. We'll just have to wait and see. We do know that there was no FAQ in November last year. As far as I could see, there wasn't anything publicly announced as to why. They've obviously had their FAQ in May as if nothing's happened and gone wrong. So it's just back to business as usual. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Just on that, yeah, just stepping aside from the rumour, I want to circle around and tackle the rumour again in a little bit more detail. But the first thing is, yeah, what we actually do know, as you say, Wilson, you're spot on. There wasn't an FAQ in November, and allegedly, one of the playtesting team was asked why there wasn't one in November, and the response they gave was, "Oh, we were just too busy and we forgot about it." That was the answer given by one of the current playtesting team that is involved in the release of new teams, which raises the question: what were they too busy with to forget the FAQ? Is it potentially a new rules set that they're challenging? We don't know, but playtesting of a new edition would certainly make them busy, particularly if it's not smooth. Fact we do actually have is that we haven't seen a new team this year. The last team we've seen release is the Chaos Dwarves. That's getting long in the tooth for a release cycle that's meant to have 2 teams a year. Well, we're now middle of June with nothing, so it's not following the usual release pattern. The only release we've actually had for Blood Bowl in 2025 is the rollout of Maple Highgrove and Swiftline Glimmershard. We haven't seen anything else other than some Warhammer community how to play various teams. Nothing else. So that's what we actually do know. Now, is this rumour true? I challenge you as listeners, please, first of all, go and listen to the Get the Ref podcasts and find out for yourself. I've actually transcribed the rumour in our Facebook group, so you can go and read it yourself. There's some really interesting details about the rumour that, in my head anyway, make sense. So some of those is things that you would think, well, anybody who's making up the rumour would probably arrive at that conclusion, like saying that there's going to be 2 new Chaos teams released within 12 months of the new box. Well, people have been saying, well, Tzeentch and Slaanesh are going to come. That's just a matter of time. Anybody could have made that part up, which that's a fair comment. Also, the other bit that makes sense to me is, don't get too tired to tackle on your dwarf lineman. That kind of comment that, dwarves are going to lose tackle. Well, GW have already demonstrated that they're not afraid of taking tackle off dwarves. They did it with the OWA team. They've done it with the Chaos Dwarves. The problem with tackle on a dwarf team is it's just such a feel bad when you're up against that dwarf team and you're taking goblins to them, or you're playing a stunty team with lots of dodge, or you're playing Amazons. So there's a problematic matchup there that I think GW are trying to eliminate. And so it would be a fairly logical step to say, well, we're just going to get rid of teams starting with a lot of tackle. And I guess
on the flip side of that, though, Babs, is not having a team that has easy access to tackle does overbalance it in favour of elves and stunties compared to the rest of the field. If they don't have their natural predator to keep their numbers in check, they're just going to be out of control.
Which is true. But I think what they're trying to avoid, I think, is this kind of scissors paper rock matchup where if your natural predator, so to speak, comes up against you, the chance of you winning that game is very slim. And I guess that's a bit of a feel bad, and I think that's fair. So I think there's a bunch of it that makes a fair bit of common sense. But I do think also just having this release cycle out and them saying lots of very specific details about the new rules is going to have 12 teams in it. and then they're going to release miniatures for those teams with an additional sprue in them, and then there's going to be a rollout of a bunch of teams, including deliberately holding the mixed race teams in reserve so they get miniatures of their own, although they don't explicitly state that, but that seems to be what they're alluding to. It's a lot of it makes sense in my head, and so I think the rumour stands up and draws attention to itself by the way that it's constructed, whether it's true or not. We want to say to wrap up Campfire Yarns?
I think we've done our best by saying, look, this is a rumour. We don't know, but we're giving reasons why we think it's true.
Or why we think it could be true.
It could be true, yeah.
The only thing in my mind that holds it back is that there's a new edition of Horus Heresy coming this year. So, are they going to have 2 big box releases in the same year?
Oh, well, that was the other one, Babs. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but wasn't there was something in there about that they're having a specific, I don't know, company or portion of their factory that is dedicated to creating these?
There is a new factory coming online in Nottingham. So they're actually bringing a new factory online that has increased capacity to produce the miniatures. So that the Blood Bowl range will fit within that increased capacity so that their other lines aren't affected by the increased demand that having 3 teams a year and hopefully increased sales of those teams is going to create. And apparently that part of the rumour is true, that there is actually a new factory that is planning to be up and running by the 3rd quarter of 2026, like the rumour states. The other thing I was just going to say is, I've had a couple of people who have listened to the rumour and felt a bit of anxiety or stress about the rumour. Like, oh no, I don't particularly want it to be true. Look, there's some things about the rumour that I think aren't particularly solid. So I find it, if the rumour is trying to suggest that they're going to re-release the Blood Bowl 2016 sculpts a second time, but just add some miniatures to those sculpts, as new positionals or whatever, I don't think they're going to see the increased sales the rumour claims they're trying to achieve. I think that would be foolish of GW to do that. I also think that the rumour tries to articulate that there are these 12 teams that are coming in the initial rules, and it tries to name those teams. But those teams would be the teams you would want to actually rejig and re-release with some changes to the roster, like the Goblins, for example, or Chaos Chosen, and Shambling Undead is another. Those rosters you would, if GW are going to kind of tweak them up like we know they've been doing under Blood Bowl 2020, you would think that they would want to take their time and get those right and release them with their own spike magazine, because those first 12 teams that were released under Blood Bowl 2016, a bunch of those missed their spike. So it's just that bit doesn't gel with me. But the rumor could be false on that. But the other thing I just want to say is, even if the rumor is true, there's no reason to be stressed about it. I actually think I trust Jay Clare. I think he's demonstrated that he can make adjustments to the rules and make changes to the rules that are good and sensible. Things like taking swarming off Underworld, for example. And I just think that I trust him to make good, wise decisions. And it sounds from the rumour that they're going to make tweaks to the rules rather than introduce a whole new rules set. Sure, they might change the way skills work, and the rumour talks about that. But I actually think, by and large, the game will remain the same. And I think that's going to be brilliant. And it's going to show that the rumour claims that GW is going to support Blood Bowl for another 6 years minimum. I think that's also brilliant. So there's lots to be excited about if this rumour is actually true. So whether it's true or whether it's not, I think it's interesting. Do have a read, and I'm interested in your opinion. Maybe jump on our Facebook group and tell us, do you think it's true? Do you think it's not?
Yeah, and just adding to what you're saying about, people, maybe having a little bit of anxiety or something. We've only got to remember when Amazon's got re-released, there were a lot of people that had the old Amazon team, or even if they had a third-party team, they had an Amazon team, and it was fairly simple and easy just to say, well, these 2 throwers that aren't in the team anymore, I'm just going to use them to represent my Jaguar blockers. So, sorry, they did have throwers, catchers. But it's, if you've already got a team, you don't have to go, geez, now I've got to go out and buy a new team. You can quite easily, modify or just, paint the base ring a different colour to say this model is representing the new positional.
And then if you do like collecting lots of extra teams, and they come out with a brand new Orc team sculpt, and with or without new positionals, they can just get added to the pile of future fun and go with my 5 other Orc teams that need to be painted in the backlog, and we can go from there.
Is that what you call your pile of shame? Is it a pile of future fun? Right, I have to remember that.
Yeah,
It's politically correct.
it's not a pile of shame; it's a pile of future fun.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, my wallet is already not looking forward to. Look, I will buy them regardless. I'm just a sucker for it. But I know money's tight around the world at the moment. So if you're worried about it, like I said, just put a coat of paint around the base ring and say these 2 positions that aren't there anymore are going to be these 2 new ones. So it should be just set and forget. And I don't hear anyone complaining about old Amazons anymore or wishing they were back. Like, we've all just accepted and moved on, and we've done a lot of that since 2016 release and the 2020 release. Whilst there's a bit of anxiety at the start, once we've all played it, we've come to see that, hey, this is not such a bad thing. We can go on. We don't, we can still have some fun.
Completely agree. I mean, I actually really like a bunch of the changes that have happened to teams under 2020. The Norse team, for example, I think is really, really interesting now. So, yeah. Deadset Legends. Yeah, we haven't announced the winner of our Deadset Legend competition from episode 9. Can you believe that? Episode 9. Egreeza Gear Grinder, the Orc Cyborg. So we decided to style some stats based on what we thought other members of our regular commentary team would do. And the winner of that one was the one that was meant to be designed the way I designed the star player, and Millsy came up with it.
Millsy's the winner officially for that one.
By default, I'll take it.
Yeah, that's a win. I'll take it. It's fine. I'm not getting any credit out of it.
I think I achieved my mission in mimicking Millsy's style for the one I made, but obviously it was never going to be the one that won the competition.
And that's why it lost.
And then
mind you, our latest one, we actually were really close, Wilkes and I, on chewing red venom. We've come a long way since our first Deadset Legend.
Yeah, if we did end up coming up with some quite similar stats and skills and special abilities. But I think we've got to call it. I think Wilkes has got it. He's got 75% of the vote with 12 votes. So well done, Wilkes.
Cool. That's all you need, buddy. Let's go.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear any cheering from me.
2 earned red venom, 6 movement, 3 strength, 3+ agility, 5+ passing, 9+ armor, with armbar, disturbing presence, diving tackle, loner 4+, tackle with the special skill of dirty tackle for 160,000 gold crowns. Well done, Wilkes.
I think any team can find space for a journeyman. Well, not a journeyman, a mercenary linesman that can just take people off at the knees and make sure they stay down.
Even Norse teams.
Especially Norse teams.
Well, with tackle and diving tackle, I would have said Amazons, but anyway.
No, the Norse teams are taking it against the Amazons.
Yes.
All right. Millsy, do you want to introduce Gorn Whoop Whoop?
Where are they now? They've gone whoop whoop. Okay, so in this edition of Gone Whoop Whoop, we are looking at the Lustria Croakers. Yes, that's Croakers with a C. The Lustria Croakers were a Slan team. And get this, people, they were in first edition. They came out in the first edition of Death Zone. So the Slan team have been around for a long time. Let's join the bandwagon and get them back. But where have they been since then? I think Babs and Wilts, you've done a little bit of research on this as well. Where have they been?
Yeah, well, just before we look at where they've gone to, I think just to emphasise their long standing in the Blood Bowl lore, the Lustria Croakers as a team name are first named in first edition. Teams that we think are mainstays of the Blood Bowl lore, like the Reichland Reavers, don't show up until second edition. So the Lustria Croakers have actually been around Blood Bowl longer than the Reichland Reavers. And I mean that in our real world dates, not just the lore.
It does that as well.
Yes, it does. So yeah, first edition Death Zone, and then they got quite a good splash release again in second edition. So the Star Player Compendium, they got a really good spread, and they've got a lovely piece of artwork of a Slan team playing Skaven. Pete Nifton, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely Pete Nifton artwork. Yeah, they got upgraded with a few positionals in second edition. So yeah, like I keep saying, they have been around. I'm all for bringing them back. And speaking of bringing them back, they actually got brought back, well, kind of semi-officially, back in the LRB days. And Babs, you were actually on the part of the LRB committee that helped bring them back, weren't you?
Yeah, now we did cover this in decent detail in episode 9 when we talked to Tom Anders. But yeah, there were 3 new teams that were mooted for joining the official LRB list of teams, and the 3 teams were the Chaos Pact, which of course we now know as Chaos Renegade, the Underworld Creepers, which we now know as the Underworld Denizens, and the Slan. All 3 of those teams were mooted to join the official ranks. As we know, 2 of them definitely did, and 1 got left behind.
Mostly because they didn't have official or usable models, as far as I can understand it.
Yeah, that was the reason. Yeah, and then of course into the modern era, we've got Blood Bowl 2016. Now, interestingly, under kind of third edition era, and then our 2016 era, Lizardmen were kind of the team that got officially launched. Kind of the official GW Lizardmen team were kind of the beginning of what we call in the Blood Bowl community the 4th edition era. So Lizardmen got a release under the Specialist Games banner of Games Workshop at the time, and it raised a conundrum in that Lizardmen lore are these kind of large, fat, wizard, priesty toads that sit atop temples, and they aren't in jumpy things that could play on a Blood Bowl team. So, in terms of the models and they're evolving, your very original Slan models actually still had a big fat guy atop a palanquin, like there's 4 human slaves carrying this fat toad mage priest guy around, but immediately behind him is a thin Slan with a big bunch of feathers kind of to wave to keep him cool. But then when the Lizardmen team dropped as their own team, though that Slan kind of vanished from the lore, which raised an issue for Blood Bowl about where did the Slan exist. And so, by the time we weave our way through 3rd and 4th edition with no Slan team, and we get to Blood Bowl 2016, we've got famous Lizardmen teams dropped in Spike 7, and of course one of the famous Lizardmen is the Lustria Croakers.
But this time with a K.
They've got a K. Now, is it the same team? Is it a pronunciation difference, or and they claim that Lord Croak himself is the team owner, manager, which he was a famous model in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he was.
So all through the Lizardmen Spike, you've got regular mentions of the Slan being these large, fat toads that can't move under their own weight. In fact, there's a kind of did you know kind of or a remembering a coffin corner thing maybe about we remember Eclectic, an enthusiastic and youthful Slan of the 5th generation and head coach of the Ziggurat Slithers during a game against the Corond Cutters. Eclectic, the pitch himself, displaying a level of exertion at odds with most Slan. Selecting Hart promptly gave out, ending his extremely short career in an instant. Now, this coffin corner little segment, I think, is deliberately poking fun at anybody who wants to try and play, Slan as a Blood Bowl team, basically saying, well, they can't. And here's an example of why not. And I think, if you harken back to the LRB document and its justification for what Slan were, the argument at the time was that there was kind of a few younger and more energetic members that enjoyed playing the realm and traveling the realm and playing Blood Bowl. That kind of conflict corner says, no, that's not going to happen. Slan can't do that under the current law.
But as we have seen and will continue to see, law can change and does change. So there's always possibilities in the future, but just hasn't been so far. As an example, the what was the gnome team called again? The Shortstuff Scurriers were originally a gnome team back in 2nd edition that became known as a halfling team during 3rd edition and onwards. And while we haven't specifically seen them mentioned as a gnome team in the modern era, gnomes exist again, so there's always a chance.
Well, actually, the first picture of a gnome is actually in 1st edition with that Did You Know, which, as Wilt's rightly said, is also printed in 2nd edition. Did You Know said that there was once a team of gnomes, the Shortstuff Scurriers, who first started playing in the Blood Bowl in 2479. The unfortunate team lost 34 games in a row, their first ever 34 games, in fact. They promptly disbanded and went home again, taking their ball with them. So I can understand why that team haven't been retconned back to gnomes, because they're not exactly a successful team.
Well, neither are the low-down rats, but they still get a lot of mentions in the lore.
Yeah, but losing is part of the course with Goblin Law.
Yeah, but look, there is still hope for the Slan. And you got to look at Death Zone. There's a Slan Mage Priest. There's a Wizard Inducement. So Slan is still there. And I don't think it's going to take a hell of a lot to get these Slan to find an old spawning pond or something that might reinvigorate and spawn out a few of those little wiry little leaping Slan again. So my fingers are crossed. I think there's a chance. They even gave us I think it was in the 2016. They even gave us a big fat toad, Gobbler Grimlich or Grimlick. Was a mutant toad as a star player. So there's still hope. There is still hope for me.
No, I see that star player as a bit more of a dig at people who want to play Slan in Blood Bowl 2016, and I'm pleased to say Gobbler didn't make it into Blood Bowl 2020. I think I think it was basically them, trying to say, you want a frog in Blood Bowl, we'll give you a frog. Here it is. But just going back to the rationale here, right? Some people say Slan don't belong in Blood Bowl, right? There's no place. The NAF should just quietly drop them. Well, hang on a minute. Let's just run down the list, right? As I already said, Underworld became Underworld Denizens. Chaos Pact became Chaos Renegades. We know Bretonnians became Imperial Nobility, right? We know the Demons of Khorne team got a little bit of an adjustment and became the Khorne team. I would even argue the Sibian team, with all their grab, has really become the Blackhawk team we know today. So really, I would argue the Slan are just the last team left on the shelf. And it's just going to be their turn next to come down off that shelf. All these other teams did. So yeah, they might go through a little bit of reimagining, but I think GW might want to put their own spin on it and re-release it. And if that's like people want to argue, and it's going to be the Slan-ish team, and there's Slan-ish, or whether they actually, bite the bullet and retcon the whole thing and bring out official GW Slan, that actually, if they did do that, that actually has the potential to be enormous. When you actually think about sales of miniatures, I don't know whether you know much about what happened in 2016 and 2017, but in Necromunda, they released like a Beastman kind of Chaos Beastman model called Gore One Horn. That model, that model sold ridiculously well. Likewise, they released a squat model, right? Grundleson. That model sold so well, they decided to bring squats back to 40k. Like, that's how well it sold, right? And they've done similar things with like Zolcath, bringing back a Zoat, and Boa Constrictor, bringing back a Snake Man. How big a deal would it be if GW actually released, a Slan team for Blood Bowl? Like, that could be huge for them and their sales margin.
Could be, depending on their market research and how many people still have that hint of nostalgia for the Slan. We know there's at least one that we're talking to right now. But how wide and how deep does that audience actually go? Hopefully wider and deeper than we think, but we just don't know.
One of the things, like I listen to many, many, many different podcasts, and I hear them saying, Slan should be this, Slan shouldn't be that, and one of the, when they do an in-depth discussion on it, one of the things they say is like why Slan shouldn't be there is because a rookie guy that walks into a friendly local gaming store and picks up this Blood Bowl, he has no idea of Slan. It's not until he's played the game for a day and someone's got these frog figures that do this. I think that actually could be a really good sell. If we've got so many teams that have a certain play style already, aren't we due for a team that has this completely new play style that no one's seen? And it's one of the things that I love about Slan is they don't play like any other team. They've got this really unique play style. I think, Gnomes, when they come out, very unique play style for a stunty. I think it's time for a unique team. And like Bab said, there's plenty of different ways you could retcon them in. You could even go back at one time was Kislev. I think there's vast opportunity for GW to say, here's some dollars sitting here, and we can make a monster off it.
And Millsy, I think I already know the answer to this question, but you've mentioned Kislev from Blood Bowl 2 Cyanide as an option. The other option is something vaguely resembling a squig. What's your opinion on that?
Look, that's another thing that so many podcasters talk about, and so many other people in general talking about, when are we going to get a squig team? Well, squigs are these great big things that just bounce around, just like Slan. If GW said, okay, we're going to have a squig team and we're going to have cave squigs and they're going to be strength 3 and forest squigs that are strength 2 and agility 2, I'd be all right with that. I'll still use my frog miniatures. I will go out and buy a squig team. Don't you worry about that. Probably convert 2 or 3 myself. But like you said, that's a perfect way to sell existing GW. They have them already. They've already got squigs. Why not make that a team? And how do you do that? Well, we've already got an existing roster that works. It's been in the NAF for so long. It works. It's not overpowered. They're not winning every team or every event. I think it's a no-brainer. GW, get onto it, guys. You're missing out.
Yeah, so I guess the NAF have kept the Lustria Croakers nearby. They might not be in the official GW teams, but certainly at NAF tournaments they're strongly encouraged. So the Lustria Croakers are nearby. If you were in complete control and had to choose an alternate way for them to make their comeback, if GW are going to stick to their guns and say, no, we can't retcon a retcon, you're going to have to bring them back some other way. What alternate method? Would you go the squig route? Would you go some other route? Let's hear your favourite fan way. Would you go Kislev? Would you do something else? What would you do, Wilts?
I'd probably go with squigs myself because everyone loves goblins. Everyone loves goblins flying through the air stupidly. And squigs give you a way to do that, whether it's squig riders or just squigs in general. I think it's the easiest way to keep it on theme and tie it into existing teams existing armies in Age of Sigmar and the Old World, and shouldn't be that big of a stretch.
What about you, Milts? Not Milts, Millsy.
Well,
Milts.
Milts. If you've got to change them, my preferred method would be the squigs, but I don't think they need to. Slan is something that, the IP is something that GW have. They were the first ones to come up with them. They're not infringing on anyone. They're not doing anything. They're just going, hey, we've got these things. Do you remember squats? Yeah, we've got them back now. Everyone loves them. Do you remember Slan? Yeah, we're bringing them back now. Everyone will love them. if they've got to change, go to Squigs. But I think they could really do well with just actually releasing Slan. It's one of their original IPs.
And you could easily have the law to back it, right? What you could say is that the Slan, mage priests are really worried about their own dwindling numbers. And they're like, okay, we're going to need to come up with some other way of having a new generation of Slan mage priests. They basically use their magic to develop a new spawning pool to try and make new Slan, and it doesn't quite work. But instead, they get these bouncing, frog-like things out of the spawning pool. And they're like, well, what are we going to do with these guys? I don't know. Let's get them to play Blood Bowl. Like, you could easily make the law back the models. You can have it consistent with the law that is in the Lizard Man Spike. I don't think you need to go, trying to shift the fundamentals.
Or do they make it as a new positional to go into a Lizardman adjacent team where they might get 0 to 2, 0 to 2 Saurus Warriors, and 0 to 4 of some other new positional to go with their regular skinks. The same way that Black Orcs are similar to Orcs, but not exactly the same. They have a similar theme, but they do it differently.
I mean, they'd certainly have access to the same stars because they'd be in Lustria Super League. The other rumor that I don't mind, and I've said it myself, is that you could bring them back as a Slaanesh team. So it would take a little bit more work, but you could do it.
I think that one's a bit more of a stretch than the other rumors we've been discussing recently.
Yes, but that rumor is actually part of the rumor we talked about earlier, that they're looking for 2 new Chaos teams. So if Slaanesh is one of them, it's like, how do we do it? We'll make them Slaanish. I'm all for that as well.
We'll just have to wait and see. Time will tell. So Lustria Croakers, I guess they're still whoop whoop.
A whoop whoop or through a time warp or something like that. There's warp business involved.
Warp.
They've got warp.
Yeah, maybe the Lustria Croakers with a K are all just a front for the real Lustria Croakers.
They're holding up cardboard cutouts in front of them as they move around the field, and you can't really see who's behind them.
Hey, coming up in Down Underworld Denizens, we're going to interview our guest commentator for episode 14, Sven Drakenspear. If you don't know who Sven Drakenspear is, then you obviously don't know who was the winner of the Chaos Cup last year. But let me tell you, Sven Drakenspear is quite a name in the Canadian Blood Bowl community, and we'll give a proper intro in a minute. I'd like to introduce to you Sven Drakenspear. That's actually not his real name, but that's the name he goes by online. He is our guest extraordinaire. He comes onto Eye of Nuffle podcast regularly. In fact, he's just completed a stint filling in for Ian, not the porn guy, McKinley. He is similar to me, loves a good analysis of data, loves some good stats crunching, loves looking at what does that mean for Blood Bowl. He also blogs. He's a big blogger. You can actually look at his blog. We'll have his blog, Ask Sven Drakenspear, on our show notes. He is also one of the top 10 Blood Bowl coaches in Canada. So he's no slouch when it comes to actually getting those touchdowns. So I'd like to introduce Sven Drakenspear.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Yeah, so from one Steve to another, welcome to Down Underworld Denizens. We're going to kick off with some of our regular guest commentator questions, and Millsy's going to ask our first.
All righty, Sven. So now that you've been ousted from the Eye of Nuffle because Ian McKinley's back, we here at Down Underworld Denizens, we want to get to know you a bit better. So the first thing I'd like to know is how and when did the Blood Bowl bug first sink its teeth into you?
Yeah, so I've gotten into it much later in life than a lot of people. There was no Blood Bowl being played in my small little town that I grew up in. There was Warhammer Fantasy and 40K getting played, and so that's what when I got into miniature gaming as a teenager, that's what I got into. When university hit, I kind of gave that all up and focused on other things. And so when I changed jobs about 8 years ago, I had a new colleague and her husband played, and I don't know how it even came up in conversation, but I started playing with him and getting back into 40K. But I really found that 40K was in a very different place, and I was in a very different place with kids and all that kind of stuff. So the kind of size and length of it and model requirement cost of it was way too high. And it was just less interesting game to me as well. So I quickly moved over into Kill Team when that came out because that filled that smaller game niche, but still gave the kind of competitive edge. But the community for it just kind of died out pretty quickly here in Ottawa. And so some of my employees were actually having a Blood Bowl 2 league going, and they were talking about it at lunch one time, and I was like, oh, hey, that sounds interesting. Oh, maybe I could join that. And so they let me in, and after that, none of them play anymore, but I got into the tabletop scene. I first played, my first ever tabletop game was Capital City Kickoff 2020, and really haven't looked back since then, and played a lot as a result. And I'm now running the Capital City Kickoff with Not the Porn Guy McKinley as well.
Awesome. So during your travels so far, do you have one specific team that you enjoy more than the others?
Yeah, 100%. I'm an elf coach at heart, but dark elves are really where I find my jam. Again, no passing game, but just the ability to reposition nearly all your pieces every turn. And we'll get onto it again, I'm sure, later as well. But I think positioning is 110% the most important aspect of Blood Bowl. And as a result, the ability to reposition most turns gives you an ability in that edge, in that aspect of the game that most teams don't have.
Absolutely.
Wow. We have two Steves on the podcast who both love Dark Elves. How about that? Hey, just wanted to ask you. I've heard a lot about your tournament play. Do you play in a league, and which one do you prefer? Do you prefer a tournament or do you prefer a league?
Yeah, so locally here in Ottawa, we have the Ottawa Gatineau Blood Bowl League, and we're currently in a summer season. I actually just played a league game last night, my time, early morning your time, so I do play in that. I play in a Ontario Fumble League, the Warble League. Do enjoy league play. It's a very different way of playing, and the way you think about league play is very different. And the kind of teams that are good in league play is very different. So it's nice to have that different aspect of Blood Bowl. Now, at the end of the day, I would still say tournament play is much more favorable to me. I prefer the game to be as balanced as possible. I don't like having insane TV differences come up. I don't like crazy powered star players showing up and ruining teams. So you spend a lot of time in league developing teams, and things can happen, and your league play kind of goes down the tube with that. But tournaments, because it's Resurrection, you show up, everyone's got a relatively balanced team in theory, and you should have a balanced chance of winning the game for the most part against any opponent you sit down against. And so I much prefer that in a competitive sense. League play is definitely important, and I think it's really clutch for drawing new players in and growing the game. But as a favorite way to play, tournaments are where it's at for me.
Yeah, brilliant. So you mentioned their balance, and then and also talking about star players. So obviously there can be a little bit of angst somewhere along the lines. If you had a chance to change one thing in Blood Bowl, whether it's a rule or a add or delete a team, what would your one change be?
Well, if we're going to go on star players, I think I'll just go right back to it. Previous editions, you had star players for all the teams, but they were largely positionals for that team with some cool special skills, things that you wouldn't normally see. And the intent was to replace a player who was missing from your team in a league game. You're missing your undead blitzer. Well, here's a star player, undead blitzer, and he's got some cool skills and he's something different. And so drop him in, and it's still the same team, but just kind of a cool star player. I totally understand where GW went with only like 20 models of star players out. They kind of had to change it up at the beginning of BB 2020 for monetary reasons and for business reasons. But now they have a lot more star players out. As we get more star players available, it'd be really nice to see them start limiting those teams that can have certain star players to the ones that make sense. Griff should play on human and human adjacent teams at most. He shouldn't be playing for every team in Blood Bowl almost. These kind of challenges just radically change a team. Like having a Skaven Gut Runner on Chaos teams just totally changes and covers the weaknesses of the team. Give them another strength 4 blocker, and it's more of the same. So it's nice to, if we could change things, to go back to kind of having those star players really just replace the positionals on the team rather than having them radically change the play style of teams.
So what are you saying about my Grifflings? Come on.
No, you got to use deep root halflings if you want to be a true halfling coach.
Ugh.
So after just having had that discussion about star players being inherently unbalanced in the current edition, who is your favorite star player? Either the model or their performances on the table?
Yeah, I like some of the more underrated star players. So two of the ones that I've used extensively, EPB 2020, when given the chance, are the Black Gobbo and Zug. Zug is, I think, quite underrated in that, he's no negative trait, block, movement 4, big guy. He's like an upgraded mummy. A lot of people talk about Undead being one of the best teams in the game, and it's the 2 mummies that make Undead so good. And having a moving up block mummy on your team is huge. So I think he goes wildly under the radar because he's not as flashy as a lot of the other stars. And the Black Gobbo, people talk about Black Gobbo being super expensive at 225. Totally get it. But he doesn't have secret weapon. So if you're thinking you're going to use 2 to 3 bribes to keep him around in the game, that's 150K of team value for 3 bribes. So if you factor that into his price, he's 75K, and he stabs, and he's a 3+ passer for bomb, and he's got sidestep, he's got armor up, and he's just a really good star. He's a little harder to fit in to a lot of teams, but 225 is actually, when you think about it deeply, not that expensive.
Yeah, I was actually looking at the Black Gobbo the other day because he's so weird in that he's got all the secret weapons. I mean, other than chainsaw and death roller, but like he can stab you, he can throw a bomb, and he can foul you. He's got.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
So he's definitely your pick as a down underrated star player then.
Yeah, nice.
There you go.
I like that. Yeah. Hey, I have threatened that given that Ian McKinley has visited Australia, that I'm going to return the favour. I've threatened to do something completely ridiculous, like go to Chaos Cup in Florida and then drive up to see you guys. And if I did make it all the way up to Ottawa, and we went out to a pub, what would you order as your favourite pub meal?
Fish and chips are definitely where it's at. It's hard to get good fish and chips. Everyone has fish and chips, but a lot of places, they're not amazing, but good fish and chips are definitely the best pub food for me.
Cool. So we've already touched base on how you think Zug is an underrated star, but actually here in Australia, Zug is actually a reasonably common star to see. We actually see Zug get quite a bit of play in tournaments. I'm interested to hear a little bit more about how you've had a bit of a look of Australian data. I'm interested to hear from you what you think is distinct about Australian Blood Bowl from your observations.
Yeah, so I've kind of taken out the overall world rates for Blood Bowl 2020 and the Aussie world rates for BB 2020, as well as looking at the data so far for this year and last year. And I pulled out a few things from that for a kind of competitive percentage rate. Orcs and Chaos Chosen actually stand out as big differences in the Australian meta. Orcs traditionally around the world have a 49.8% win rate over BB 2020. they have a 54.4% win rate in Australia. And this year they have a 58% win rate in Australia. And in the world, they have a 48.2% win rate. So those are vastly different numbers. In the kind of orc meta, they are the most popular team in the world. They're also the most popular team in Australia. So those kind of things make sense, but the win rate difference is absolutely massive there. Any thoughts, guys, on how you see the orcs in your meta?
Well, I think a lot of that goes down to Ken Dunford.
No, I was going to say, hey, Millsy, doesn't that have something to do with a bunch of us all going down to Eucalyptus Bowl a couple of years ago and all taking orcs and completely ruining the tournament because there was like 12 orc teams out of 60 or something?
We did do that. But you're also talking to Wilt here, who's actually had a couple of wins with Chaos Chosen as well. So
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've played orcs from both sides of the table as well. I haven't really done spectacularly with them, but I've done better than 50% myself. But certainly Chaos Chosen are my best performing team, bar none. I don't know if there's anything different about the way I play them as opposed to other people, but I think I just get some good matchups, and I just don't let people get away with their own game plan, and I make them stick to mine.
Yeah, just on orcs. Yeah, I think orcs is a bit of a weird one in that I think orcs are actually a very strong team, really strong team, and the win rate seems surprisingly low. I think, back in BB 2016 era, I think a lot of people just put that down to, well, a whole bunch of, new coaches take orcs to a tournament because they're robust and they came in the box. And so they're pretty easy for a rookie coach to take. But I'm not sure whether the data matches that anymore.
No, I've heard that argument a lot. If we're looking at Imperial Nobility and Black Orcs being in the box now, right? Most players have those two teams. Neither of them are popular, unlike Orcs, and neither of them perform brilliantly at all. And that's kind of shown out both in winning tournaments. They don't win a lot of tournaments, whereas Orcs do, despite their low win rate, do win a decent amount of tournaments around the world. Is that just by volume of them playing more than everyone else? You can take the data out and look at it. But it's interesting. I've talked about this in my Canadian blog posts as well. In all of BB 2020, Australia's played 12,826 registered NAF games versus the 341,272 games around the world. So, we're talking about individuals. We're talking about Millsy or Wilt's doing brilliantly with orcs, having an effect on the data. Certainly in these kind of smaller things, if someone's played a lot of games, I looked up Captain Prosecco.
Yeah. John O'Delacy, friend of the show.
Yeah.
Been on. Yeah.
He's played the most games of Blood Bowl in Australia in 2020 at 190. And so those kind of people, the top, obviously one person at 190 games, but the top 20, 30 players who've played the most games can have a really strong effect on the win rates in a smaller sample size, right? But going back to Chaos Chosen, just look at the numbers for you guys as well. So globally, in BB 2020, they have a 45.4% win rate. In Australia, they have a 51.2% win rate. And this year alone, they have a 53.4% win rate in Australia, where they have a 48.7% worldwide. So again, over 5% difference in win rates.
Yeah, no, I was totally just teasing about us swaying the data. Hey, how does the number of games played under BB 2020 in Australia compare with Canada? How do those numbers differ?
Very similar. Not a lot of difference at all.
Yeah, cool. I had another question that you can take on notice if you don't have the answer right now. But my anecdotal evidence is that lizard men, I think, are very underrepresented in terms of games played in Australia. I think globally they tend to be considered quite a competitive team and taken a fair bit, but I see them very rarely. Is that something the data shows up?
Yes, and the data also shows that Australians aren't very good with lizards. So globally, they have a 49.8% win rate. In Australia, they have a 46.8% win rate. So, not absolutely massive difference, but 3% is not nothing either.
It's definitely noticeable, yeah.
Well, I played Blizzards last year, and I might have helped bring our results down. I had a shocker.
I wonder if the Chaos Chosen results have got something to do with our rules packs and tiering, because obviously all this data is dependent upon the rules pack it's built upon.
100%. Yeah. So, however your tierings work and whether or not Chaos Chosen are consistently in the second bottom tier, might give them a little extra if you're giving a bit more to those bottom tiers. In Canada, you don't really see them above the second bottom tier. But again, the tiers vary on how people have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tiers. But consistently, they're down near the bottom of the tiering. So, and globally, you see the same thing. They're never high in the tiering. Well, so if we're looking at those are the ones where Australians are doing really well with, that the rest of the world is doing less well with. Another category to look at is elves. So elves consistently, all four of the elf teams are 52 to 55% win rate globally. In Australia, elves are not nearly that good. Pro elves, which are normally the lowest performing or second lowest performing team in the world, are the top performing team in Australia at 53.2%. That's bang on the exact same as the rest of the world. However, dark elves, wood elves, and high elves are also all massive drops. Dark elves don't have a 50% win rate in Australia. Wood elves don't have a 50% win rate in Australia. And high elves actually coming in above them again at 51%. So comparatively, dark elves are 54.3% over all BB 2020, and wood elves are 54.1%. So you're looking at over 4% drops, closer to 5% drops in win rate for dark elves and wood elves.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, I joke that Danny Pickler is the one keeping those pro elves up there with the win rate.
Yeah, and dark elves have a 38.2% win rate so far this year in Australia.
Wow.
What's the number of games like on those? Because we don't see a lot of them at tournaments all the time.
Yeah, so that's over all of DB 2020. So we're not looking at just this, like the 38 is just this year, which isn't a lot of data, obviously. Just pulling it up now, but it's certainly startling how low those guys are. Yeah, so Dark Elves, it's 421 games of Dark Elves
This year?
over all of BB 2020. No, of all BB 2020 in Australia. Yeah, they're kind of middle of the pack popularity. Wood Elves are much more popular and still lower win rate. So Elven Union is relatively low, 283 games to get to that number.
Millsy, you want to move on? I'll ask you a question.
Yeah, well, speaking of choice, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to listen to our latest episode where we did a bit of an in-depth into which is better, taking an apothecary or a Bloodwiser keg. So Babs did some analysis on that. Did you care to weigh in on that, Sven? And was Babs correct?
Yeah, so I did manage to get a chance to listen to it. At this moment, I don't remember the exact end analysis. Babs, you want to give me a quick synopsis?
Yeah, the short version is if you're going to end up with more than 6 to 8 KO rolls in a game, then the Bloodwiser keg is more valuable than an apothecary, and that tracks back to having 4 players in your KO bin early enough to get those 6 to 8 KO rolls.
Yep. No, I would definitely. If you're getting that many rolls, volume is so important. We can talk about that with all this data. Any statistician is going to tell you that any of the data that we look at in win rates and percentages is infinitesimally tiny and not really worth much. Unfortunately, it is all the data we have, and the fact that it's relatively consistent year over year means it's relatively tracks. But if you're getting enough volume of KO rolls, Bloodwiser keg, certainly you're going to roll those 3s more often. Certainly in 6 to 8 KOs, if you're talking about average dice, right, you should roll 1 to 2 threes, which will bring back 1 to 2 players. So the big thing that I look at whenever I'm looking at anything in Blood Bowl is there's so few sure things in Blood Bowl, right? You can move if you're not directly in a tag zone. You can move your squares. That's guaranteed, right? That's one of those things you first teach new players is do all the easy things first, do the low risk things first. And movement is 0 risk, right? You have that, so you can do your movement first. The thing with the keg is that it is dice dependent, and so in some games you're going to roll 4 threes, right, in those K rolls, and it's going to be brilliant because it's brought back 3-4 players. There's going to be other games where you roll no threes on your K rolls, and you're going to say, well, that was a waste of 50K. The thing with the Apothecary is that it's more guaranteed, right? And again, as a result, with Blood Bowl, things that are guaranteed are more likely to come up. You're more likely to be able to use them. So with an Apothecary, the badly hurt roll, if you randomly have a badly hurt roll with someone who players, and it's, especially if it's early, getting him back is clutch, right? You just guaranteed I have that player back, and I would normally he'd be dead. There'd be 0 chance of getting him back. And then there's the power Apo where you're Apoing a KO roll, particularly early in the second half. That can be really clutch. So those are guaranteed successes. And so personally, because of the guaranteed nature of that Apothecary, I prefer the Apothecary over the Bloodwiser keg, because I don't know if I'm going to roll the threes on the KO rolls. I don't know if I'm going to have enough KO rolls to get my volume, to get my value out of it. Whereas the Apothecary, I'm guaranteed that if you get a KO roll on me, I can use it to keep that player on the pitch. So it can be absolutely clutch in those kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
Bonus
yeah.
question for that one then is, if you've got 100k spare for inducements, or 100k spare in general for a tournament, would you prefer to take 2 Bloodwiser kegs or 1 and the APO?
Yeah, 1 in the APO. If I had that kind of cash for just inducements, 1 in the APO.
I don't think I've convinced you, because you're still going the Apoth, but I guess what I'm saying is, particularly with certain teams, I think a Bloodwiser keg is actually a down underrated choice. I actually think there are some team types, and I mentioned vampires in episode 13, but there are others, stunties in particular, where I actually think the keg makes more sense.
Yeah, well, you're not trying to save a high value player with snotlings or something like that, right? You're just looking at volume. You want volume of players. So certainly, if in that case, right, rather than saving 1 snotling, if you can get multiple snotlings back, then certainly that's more important than any individual snotling. But yeah, I think, right, like because of the fact that you're looking at a D6, everything we're doing is on a D6. So the result of 3 is the most important thing that we're talking about. When we're talking about like an increased percentage chance on it.
Yep.
So if we're looking at 6 KO rolls, again, you're looking at perfectly average dice. Your dice work perfectly average, and you roll 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on all those KO rolls. You're only going to roll 1 3 on 6 KO rolls. So that's 50K is being used to get 1 player back. Again, though, dice averages means that you're not going to roll those exact numbers every time on KO rolls. But that's the kind of way you're thinking about it in the sense of it. If I'm going to roll 30 KO rolls in a tournament and I have this keg, how many players over the course of that is going to get me back? I think the Apothecary is just, especially on teams like elves and stuff like that, is way more valuable. And especially if you're investing stacks and stuff like that in players, keeping a stack player on the pitch or from the KO from the dead bin are huge.
Yeah, although obviously from the dead bin is you really want a badly hurt result, which only turns up 38% of the time. So it's again, it's dice dependent. But
especially early in that second half, right? Like if you get a KO early, right, you're keeping that 11th player on the pitch. It's 1 more player. If you're expecting a long drive, right, that's massive.
Yeah, I don't see it very often in tournament play. Yeah, not here. Like I hear about it, but I don't see it practicably very often. Anyway, I just think it's a really interesting statistic to look at, because when you do the combination probability of that 16.6 repeater percent with those KO rolls, you know, with 8 KO rolls, you've got 76% chance of it paying off once, with another 40%, like a combined 40% chance within that 76% chance that you're going to get multiple values out of it, like multiple uses, like rolling that 3 on the D6. So
Yeah, one to two times, right? Like, it's certainly valuable, but it really depends on drive state. Like, it's one of these things I talk to new players about a lot, right? Like, what's the state of the drive? Like, if that KO roll is happening on turn 15, that's useless to you, right? If it's happening
yeah,
on turn 2, that's massive for you. So it's also about like the state of the game, when are you getting those KO rolls and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, there's an argument for both, 100%.
Well, and I also think it's about what are you trying to bring to your team? Are you trying to keep a key player like a war dancer on the field, or are
100%,
you
yeah.
interested in just making sure that you've got enough numbers to field your team? Like they actually
Yeah.
have a slightly different purpose. You know, small but important,
For sure.
and that's why I think a Bloodweiser keg makes sense on vampires, is because your key players, your vampires, they already have regen, so you know, an apoth is really only going to come into play if the regen fails. So, you know,
Well, except you have to use the APO before you roll for regen, so that doesn't even come into it.
Yeah, but again, looking at the power apo usage, right? If you're getting a vampire KO'd, there's no regen roll. He's just off the pitch, right? Any result where he's off the pitch can be bad, especially early in the second half. Again, we're talking about. So if you're using that apothecary to keep a KO'd vampire early in the second half, that's massive upside.
Yeah, potentially. I deliberately go with a 6 vampire builds for tournaments usually.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, you lose a vampire, you're like, I've still got 5 more of them.
I played a game where I was down to 0 vampires recently, so you know, 1 would have been nice.
I played a game where I had nothing but vampires left on the pitch, and I only had 5 men for a kickoff, and I still managed to score from it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's an interesting. I'd just say that I think the Bloodweiser keg at tournament play is underrated on certain teams.
No, for sure. Yeah, especially stunty or stunty-esque teams.
Yeah. Or teams with really low armor, perhaps, but yeah, it's situational. Anyway, we could probably argue about that for hours. Let me move on. Hey, I wanted to just something you've uncovered that I just wanted to touch on, and maybe enlighten our listeners to, is you've done some data analysis on teams that have had more than 10 games played with the same coach. So, for example, if a coach takes Goblins and plays more than 10 games with them at a tournament that's NAF tracked, their win rate suddenly bounces. It goes up. It's much higher than before. Yeah, if you want to share that, what advice have you got for our listeners that kind of flows out from that data?
Yeah, so I did a blog post a couple of years ago called "Play More, Win More." Just looking at the win rate of coaches who played more games. Now, obviously, there's kind of looking at playing more Blood Bowl means you're more dedicated to it. So certainly, the more dedicated players or more experienced should play better. But going into just one team, it's huge. The differences for some players, and I think that probably tracks pretty easily with most people's experience, right? Like, the more you play a team, the more you get used to it, and you can see differences in play. Like, my co-host there for a bit on the Eye of Nuffle, Martin, he took it to heart. He played Lizardmen a ton, and he's doing the same thing with Orcs at the moment. And you can see differences in his play. You play him early, and he's playing the team like you normally play a team. Suddenly, the Sauruses are 2 squares up from the ball instead of 1 square from the ball, because he's experienced enough time where he's failed to pick up with that skink decide to let it go because he's only got 2 rerolls, and it's bounced onto a source and then bounced in front of the source and caused massive problems for him. So he doesn't do that anymore. He puts them 2 squares so that if he fails to pick up, the ball can't bounce onto the source and then bounce in front of them. So you see small changes to people's game as they play the game more with that team, and they see, oh, well, in this case, I really need to be doing something different with this team. And I think that plays out in the data where you're seeing things like goblins. Goblins are a complicated team. You have so many different secret weapons going on. The build for goblins can be crazy different. And I think as you play them more and you see what works and what doesn't, you're going to be able to tease out those plays with goblins, which is a surprisingly complex team.
Yeah, brilliant. Totally agree. More reps with the team means you do better with them. And a bunch of us are trying to go to the Oswald State Championships, which are a bit like the Eurobowl, and we're madly trying to do as many reps as possible. Getting ready for that. So totally agree.
Moving on from that, obviously every year there's a lot of tournaments run the same Eurobowl rule set for practice leading up to the big event. Do you see that skewing tournament results data depending on how the rules packs sit relative to the standard meta?
Yeah, 100%. Tiering has a mass effect. In the last I've Nuffle podcast, we were talking about it quite a bit, like the difference in arena from the last season to this season shows a vast amount of data on how much tiering can have an effect on tournament play, and tournament-esque play in case of arena. Having that kind of set tiering system makes an absolutely massive difference. So it depends on how much of a change you're looking at. Like the Eurobowl Hungary rules is a big departure from past Eurobowl and even the World Cup rules. So it's going to have a large effect, whereas I would say the last year's Eurobowl rules, the World Cup rules, was much tighter, closer rule sets. So you wouldn't see as big a swing. But it's a little bit hard to see on a global context, because unless you have a perfect data set where you can see all the really different rule sets from the World Cup rule set, it'd be so much volume of work at the moment to try and separate that. But last year here in Canada, we had the Underworld Cup, which is the North American team tournament, and that had vastly different rules. And we saw that Elven Union was the top performing team. They were in tier 3. They got 2 more skills than tier 2, and they got 4 more skills than tier 1 in that rule set. And so it was absolutely vast, and you could see the massive win rate changes in the Canadian, again, smaller data set, a lot of Amorical rule set tournaments. Looking at your tiering in your tournament or the tiering you're going at is absolutely massive. There's going to be huge changes, and those top players who go to these tournaments often have kind of an eye for what's good and what's not good in a tournament, and thinking about that and then taking a team that is good in that meta probably gives those top players an extra 2 to 3% angle on a lot of other players, just for the sheer fact that they can see what's good in the rule set and then take that and maximize that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you did touch on the arena competitions from Blood Bowl 3. Now, my understanding is that there's a lot more data available from those sorts of events where you can see casualty results as well, which is not recorded by the NAF. Does that give you more of an understanding of the relative balance between teams, do you think?
Yeah, it's a huge volume of data over a short period of time. And just as we discussed, looking at different rule sets in the current data is not easy, right? It just takes a lot of change. Whereas there's a lot of games being played on Arena in a NAF style mode that gives you a huge amount of data. And I think it'd be really good for big tournaments, especially things like the World Cup, to go and say to the developer, hey, can we test our rule set out for the next season of your thing, and see what they say? Because you can get a huge amount of data on what's good, what's bad. Did you over tweak something? Did you under tweak something? And say, okay, we're happy with this kind of spread. Of course, the challenge at the moment is that not all the teams of Blood Bowl are in Blood Bowl 3, although it's getting pretty close. We're largely missing the stunties, but things like vampires have kind of a large effect as a missing piece there. But I think it's just an absolutely massive amount of data in a short window, that even things like the big V, right? Like, go to the developer and say, hey, can we test out our rule set in your arena and see what that huge amount of data gives you?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it'd be a lot of fun to work through.
Yeah, I was going to say that the data you're looking at with those arena rule sets, with a couple of tiny tournament tweaks to the tournament rules pack for that arena mode, just one extra skill to tier 2 or something like that. It's pretty minor change, and it saw some pretty big swings in percentages between tier 2 and tier 1 teams. But of course, the other factor is, of course, Amazon's dropped at the same time, so you've got Amazons running around affecting the data as well. So you've got to kind of mitigate that in your data analysis.
Yeah, for sure. That's always going to be a thing until they get all the teams in Blood Bowl. When vampires drop, that's going to see a wild change in the win rate of teams, for sure. I have no doubt. But Amazons, it just shows how strong Amazons were. They dropped in where tier 1 was struggling hard, and they still had a 55% win rate. So they outperformed all the rest of the tier 1 teams, shockingly, or not shockingly, to everyone who's starting to experience a lot of games against Amazons.
Yeah, I'm really keen to do a bit of a dive. I'm keen to actually drill into that arena data myself. I've actually reached out to Stubacker and found out where he's getting the raw data from for his analysis that he did on the Scab blog that he does, and I'm keen to drill into that data myself. So Sven, you've whet my appetite. I'm keen to find out some more.
Now, with Underworld had a bit of a drop in both popularity and win rates when they lost Swarming off their Snotlings. But recently I'm told they're making a bit of a comeback in sneaking back up the rankings. Do you think that's potentially Eurobowl giving them an edge over other high-tier teams? Is it that people can still take more powerful star players on them and afford the full team? Or do you think there's something else going on behind the scenes there?
Yeah, Underworld are an interesting place, right? The Snotlings going away. Certainly, everyone first reaction was that was going to drastically do it, and I should say not going away, but losing the swarming. Now you need to rely on those goblins a lot more. The goblins aren't bad, but it's really about the style of play you're going with Underworld. One of the big things that a lot of people are doing with Underworld is 3 bribes, dirty player, line rat, and I'm just going to eliminate your team. We're just going to not play Blood Bowl for a bit here until you have no players. And then when you have no players, I'm just going to score 2-3 touchdowns and win the game. And it's an unfortunate thing that it is such a high percentage play, right? They, even without the Snotlings, they still have enough numbers. You put a rat ogre on the pitch who can come in and 3 dice a lot of things in a lot of cases, get it down, and then you swarm it with players, and you have dirty player. The variance on it is huge. It's not going to work every time someone plays, but it's going to work enough most of the time when people play that they're going to get decent results out of it. So it's pretty unfortunate, honestly, that's kind of the style that's been played with it. When I was playing Underworld before the swarming thing, I was not fouling pretty much ever. Instead, I was using the Black Gobbo and using the extra players on the pitch to reposition and screen the Black Gobbo so that he could throw bombs in on cages for days. And you don't need to even hit the ball carrier, right? Just hitting a corner of the cage means you can come in and insert a guard blitzer and then come in and wrestle the ball carrier down. Then you got a gutter runner and enough bodies to kind of swarm and make it very difficult for them to get the ball back. And as soon as that gutter runner's got the ball, he runs off. But the fouling build is still brilliant, right? Statistically. So I think there was a lot of right off the bat, but the play of the Dirty Player 3 Bribe Underworld is still huge. And yeah, as you say, like, you can take the full team. You have about 300k in most tournaments to take bribes or star players. And, if you have a lot, you can take star players and 3 bribes. And it's still an incredibly difficult team to get through. I was kind of expecting them to kind of go down to more like a 52% win rate. This year they're at a 54.1, so they're still doing well. They're not into that unhealthy category this year at the moment. But I think that people realize that fouling system that they had, even without Snotlings, is still quite viable, and so it's still working.
That is one aspect of my game that I need to do a lot more practice in, is fouling. I played Snotlings in our league 2 years ago, and I've taken them to some reasonable success at tournaments. My problem is I'm too busy running 4 Snotlings and gang blocking people, and there's not enough people left over to actually get a good foul in here and there. So I definitely need to practice that part.
Oh, don't you change, Wilkes. It worked well for you that season. And besides, I don't want you fouling my team.
No, you're
Hey.
happy enough when my Snotling troll 3 dice blocks your Goblin troll.
Yeah, like, on that point, like, it's a feel bad, right? Like, no one likes playing with 3 or 4 pieces on the pitch, and having their opponent not even bother playing Blood Bowl until they've removed enough players so that you can't really play Blood Bowl, and so you've spent 2 hours playing a game where no one really played Blood Bowl for the 2 hours,
and only one person had fun.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it fun just fouling your opponent into oblivion? I don't know.
I can't speak from experience on that one, so I can't really comment, I guess.
I love fouling.
Hey, speaking of, you talked about the changes to Underworld. Speaking of changes to teams, Chaos Dwarves, right? Since their release in October of last year, they've remained really lacking in terms of how many people are actually playing them in NAF tournaments, right? Like, they're in the bottom 10 of teams taken to tournaments. And interestingly, their win rate was about 50.5% before they jumped out of Teams of Legend with the Spike release, and of course, they lost their tackle and all that kind of jazz. Now their win rate's 46.8%. So do you think that is just from the changes to the team? Do you think it's because the Eurobowl rule set's not really conducive to playing Chaos Dwarves? Is it a combination effect? Yeah. Talk to me about Chaos Dwarves and their win rate.
Yeah, Eurobowl definitely affects it, right? The restriction on only having 4 skills means you can't if you want to take all the dwarves, you can't put block on the Minos. So it's definitely a bit challenging to play them in that particular rule set. But yeah, I actually took them for a season in the Warble League, and it's a huge struggle to deal with agility teams, right? That tackle, as much as it's maligned by so many people, especially when you're playing stunties, coming up against a team full of tackle is just, the worst feeling. But the tackle is utterly essential in a team where you have almost no speed. And, when your opponent can just dodge around you, it makes it just so hard to kind of deal with them. You don't have enough to make up for it. GW clearly made that decision to take tackle off them, put disturbing presence on the 2 flamesmiths, which, okay, -1, if you have them both where the ball's going, -2 maybe on catches. If it's only -1, elves are like, it's a 3+. I don't really care, so it helps. The sneaky stab, they way overcost him. And still, stab is not a replacement for tackle at all. So you kind of left in a situation where the team used to be good into those kind of agility matchups because of the tackle. Now, they weren't like absolutely obliterating elves and all that kind of stuff. They had a slight advantage on the wood elves and all that kind of stuff in win rates at best. So they were kind of good in that matchup. When they came up against bash teams, they actually struggle. And it's the same thing with dwarves, right? You are predominantly strength 3. You have a couple strength 4 pieces. Maybe you've taken the Minotaur. But most of the bash teams are outstrengthening you. That's why you need guard everywhere in order to take those pieces and have a chance of blocking them. So you're in a situation where the bad matchup they had, maybe you've slightly improved that, right? With the Ironheart skin, maybe that one roll on Mighty Blow not working on the armor helps them a slight bit in that matchup. But realistically, you've made the agility matchup a lot worse for them. And they just lack any kind of speed or strong way of dealing with agility teams that is going to give them a much lower win rate. But it also is going to make it a lot less appealing to take that team, right? As you say, their taken rate is low. It's funny, most of these teams, right, when they get released, especially from teams of Legends, where people have copies of the team, but it's not widely available. So new players tend to not have a copy of the team. Suddenly it's widely available, and we usually see a big spike in the number of games played for those teams, whereas Chaos Dwarves, if anything, have actually dropped a little bit in popularity. We had a tournament right after they released 20 people, and we had one person play them. The same tournament the year 4 Vampires got released, there was 7 Vampire coaches, right? So how good or how perceived good the team is will also drive that popularity for people to try it out and play it. But I think Chaos Dwarves is in a hard place, because even in league play, like we're just talking about tournaments there, in league play, you're now looking at a team that's closer to Chaos Chosen kind of development path, because now you need tackle and you need guard for these matchups. And those Chaos Dwarf blockers and the Flamesmiths are what needs it, but they're not scoring touchdowns, right? So you're looking at needing 2 skills on these guys that don't even have Chaos Blockers Agility 3+ to go and get touchdowns at times. So I think the team's in a really tough place with the new system.
Yeah, and I think what also doesn't help is, the Bull Centaurs are begging for 2 skills themselves too. Like, they don't have block out of the gate either. So, they're the ones that they will beat the star player hogs if they can finally pick up a ball. But they desperately need a skill stack, and not very many tournaments that I know of would allow Chaos Dwarves to get that kind of skill stack. I'm really interested to see whether over time that settles down a bit, because Chaos Dwarves drop a few tiers, and whether that makes a difference to them.
Yeah, no, I think they have to be in the same tier with Chaos Chosen and stuff now. They're that bad.
In your opinion, should a Bull Centaur be used as a ball carrier, or more just to annoy people? And does that overlap with taking the Minotaur in the first place?
Yeah, that's a huge point of division amongst players. And I don't think there's any consensus in the community. So it's a very interesting question. Personally, I carry on the Hobgoblins. Obviously you want to get touchdowns with those bulls and all that kind of stuff, but it's kind of, for me, more incidental. You're trying to use them if you're trying to get quick scores because of the little extra speed that they have over the Hobgoblins. But generally speaking, like any bash team, you kind of want to be in a cage, and you never want your ball carrier hit. A strength 4 ball carrier is always brilliant because, if things are breaking down, it's still really hard to get in and get a block on that ball carrier. And if you strength 4, your chances of getting that ball out are just that much lower. At the same time, you're not using that bull to kind of bully your opponent, right? You're trying to bash your way through them, right? You need the strength, especially in a bash matchup. If you're not using one of your 2 bull centaurs, suddenly you're really, really down strength now. And so obviously the Mino helps with that. But in general, I would say, for the most part, if I'm playing against elves, carrying on the bull is quite good, especially if they don't have strip ball. But if I'm playing against a bash team, I really want to be carrying on the Hobgoblin. So I kind of come down on it in 2 ways there, kind of what my matchup is. But in general, I kind of want to carry on the Hobgoblin.
And you do show love to the Minotaur. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, I think it was unfortunate they took Animal Savagery off him, especially with the Ironheart skin on the blockers, because I like, again, like we were talking about, reliability, guaranteed. Yeah, he might hit the dwarf beside him, he's very unlikely to remove, but he's going to go, right? He's going to activate. He's going to do what you want him to do. And I think that's unfortunate that he's gone down to Unchanneled Fury.
That's a whole different discussion that we'll save for another time, perhaps.
You're speaking to a Chaos chosen coach here, so he loves his Minotaurs. So, Sven, do you think globally, like, have we found the solution to star players? And with this megastar getting banned and so many tournaments, coming up with their own banned list, is that the are we still searching for what to do with star players, or do you think we're on the right track?
Yeah, I think the whole community is going in largely the same direction, but there are certainly a lot of people who still love the star players, still want to see star players being played a lot in tournaments. Don't want to be saying, no, you can't play with your toys to people coming to tournaments, stuff like that. I think, for me, one of the things about tournaments is having some flavor. I don't want every tournament to be like super serious. Like, I want to play Blood Bowl chess. If I'm playing in an ultra competitive tournament, I do want to swing more that way. But I do love having these tournaments where it's like, hey, star players are for everyone, and let's just have some fun. If we're playing the exact same tournament pack 18 times, which you see all the time with like World Cup prep and Eurobowl prep, we're just using the exact same rule set again. It's like, cool. There's only so much mileage this rule set can have. So it's nice to have these different rule sets where you can be a little bit more crazy. But yeah, I think in large part, banning and taxing star players is a relatively good solution. I've seen recently some people looking to, like, all right, NAF is opening up the restrictions on what we can do with how we're restricting things. Maybe we can restrict, Griff can only play for like Imperial Nobility and humans. He can't play on halflings and ogres and stuff like that. So if you can kind of, like I was saying at the beginning, put it back to, okay, these star players are going on. You can have a star player gutter runner on Skaven, have fun, right? You can't have a star player gutter runner on Chaos Chosen. I think that's also a really good place that, a segment of the community are going. So we're not done with this whole star player meta in this edition at all. I think it's still evolving, and I think it works for the most part what we see now. But there's certainly opportunities to be more creative going forward.
Yeah, I kind of like the approach Steve Lemke had with Spike of kind of coming up with costs by star. Like the cost is not just the actual price, but in terms of how many skills or whatever it costs from your tournament pack. I've come up with a tiering system for the stars, like the team's tiering. So you've got your mega stars are your top tier, and they cost the most extra skills as well as their cost. And so you can take them, but it takes you. It's basically a team with no skills if you do. Yeah. Anyway, I kind of think something a little more granular than just mega stars and regular stars is probably part of the solution I like.
Yeah, we've even had tournaments here in London, Ontario, run by Code Red, where he's actually giving you skills, extra skills. If you take, Gretchen, you get 2 extra skills, right? So it's like now it's like you're actually
still no one did.
Yeah, pretty much. But you're tiering it to such a granular level where you're actually like incentivizing bad stars.
Just to see them on the tabletop and add a bit more variety, yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame really, because the miniature and the lore behind the miniature are actually really pretty good. I actually think, the miniature they did a pretty good job with. I actually think she's pretty cool as a figurine. It's just a shame that, maybe she needs to drop 100K and people might start taking her or something. I don't know. But hey, Sven, thanks so much for coming on down Underworld Denizens. Is there anything else you want to say to our listeners, or say to the Australian Blood Bowl community?
No, it's great to reach out and have these cross world connections. It's great to be able to chat with people who have similar interests and similar everything from across the world. Blood Bowl really brings the community together, which is where these events like the World Cup and that, which it's obviously tough for you guys to get to, are brilliant festivals of Blood Bowl to get those people together. But thanks very much for having me. It's again great to chat with some like-minded individuals from across the world.
And are you planning to still push ahead and get that blog post about Aussie Blood Bowl up?
Yeah, for sure.
And where can people find that blog if they haven't seen you before?
Yeah, so it's asksvendrakenspear.wordpress.com.
I'm sure we'll put a link of that in our show notes. Now, Sven, generally Wilt's asked this question, but we're trying to get all of our interviewees to do one thing for us. We just need you to say in your best voice, "That's brilliant."
That's brilliant.
Oh, yes,
that was good.
I love it. That's a great one.
Very nice.
Yeah, Sven, thanks so much. Hey, thanks so much for coming on. Hey, I really appreciate it. We did ask you some pretty curly ones, so yeah, thank you so much. Hey, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, that you're heading off to today. Is that right? You're heading tonight? Heading off there?
Yeah. Battle for Breath down in Kitchener. It's about a 6-hour drive. So Martin and Jad are coming up from Montreal. It's a 2-hour drive to my house, and then Ian's jumping in, and so the 4 of us are driving 6 hours or so down, depending on Toronto traffic. You never know what you're going to do getting through Toronto. Traffic is horrendous there. So
yeah, true.
That sounds like one of our tournaments.
Total respect from us to you. That's exactly what we do. We do that, don't we, Millsy?
Yes, it's like 2 or 3 hours from Rocky to here, and then it's another 5 or 6 hours down to Brisbane. So that's nothing out of the ordinary for us.
Yeah, it's unfortunately the necessity of if you want to get out in the community. There's not a ton of people who are willing to do it, but there's a handful of us. This is the only way that Martin and I can top the charts for most tournaments played by Canadians, is by making these epic long journeys.
Yeah, but how good is the road trip as part of a Blood Bowl experience? Like, I absolutely, I think that is one of the reasons why we respect you, Sven. Like, you do the road trips like us.
Yeah, and it's a great part of community, right? Hanging out for 6 hours in a car, chatting. You definitely get to know people better.
Yeah. Hey, 6 hours is rookie numbers, mate. I'm gonna go for 13, getting down to Eurobowl later in the year. And Will's, how far is your commute?
I'll be doing 13 up to Cairns end of the month with Stewie, so he's got an extra hour and a half on top of that. We're taking 2 days to do it on the way up, so it shouldn't be too bad, but we're doing a half leg, well, a quarter leg on the Sunday night after the tournament before we have a big 12-hour day on the Monday coming home. So, we've got that to look forward to.
Yeah. The distances, people in Europe, just it's incredible. You hear stories about these Brits that are like, that's 20 minutes. I don't want to go 20 minutes. And then we're routinely driving at least 2 hours to get places, right? So
it's an hour and a half for me to get to Babs's place if we just want to have a practice game or a chat session or whatever. Yeah.
It's 2.5 for me. It's like talking to some of these guys in the UK. They can't believe that we can jump on a plane and fly for 4 hours and still get off in our same state. That just blows them away.
Yep. England is closer to me than in British Columbia, right? Like it's quicker to go to London than Vancouver.
Yeah, really.
Wow.
Yeah, right. We were chatting to the Channel Fury guys, and we said, so if we got in a car in London and drove for 10.5 hours, where would we be? And they said the ocean. You'd run out of the UK to drive to,
Yeah.
Or someone in Germany, you say, I want to drive for 6 hours to get to a tournament. They say, I don't want to go to Paris for that.
Yeah. Imagine the size of their tournaments if they had people willing to do that.
Oh, that'd be just monumental, wouldn't they? They'd be just like World Cups all the time.
Yeah.
If every tournament had 300 people, like,
Mind you, I think we're on that kind of trajectory, and if the prediction that Get the Ref brought out recently is true, I think our numbers are just going to continue to climb and climb and climb. Like I think we're riding a bit of a high, as Purple Chest says. We're in a bit of a golden age of Blood Bowl. I think Eucalyptus Bowl here in Australia is going to be the second tournament with over 150 coaches at it. Like, that's just never before seen numbers. Like we wouldn't even get half that before.
Yeah. I'll put that in you guys' post to kind of the popularity change, but I definitely saw that in the numbers. Like globally last year was a 10% increase, right? And these aren't World Cup years. So having a 10% increase is incredible. That's 10,000 more games. It's like difference between 100,000 and 110,000. That's a lot of games, Blood Bowl, more. So, and as we keep going, like to see 10% increases every year, it's just even more and more every year. You're looking at 11,000, 12,000 more games. That's massive.
I'm just absolutely delighted for Blood Bowl communities everywhere. I mean, our little neighbours, New Zealand, have just managed to get their first ever tournament over 50 coaches, Capital Shield, happening this weekend. So I'm pumped for that. Like that's fantastic. It's so good to see New Zealand get a tournament with more than 50 coaches. Like that's so good for them and so good for their community.
Qualifies for a national now too.
That's it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, Sven, we'll let you go, mate.
No, mate, it's been great having you on and just listening to another one like Babs who loves those numbers, but with the guts of what you say behind all of that and the reasoning why it's awesome, and I hope our listeners like it too.
Yeah,
I'm sure they will.
And this is Millsy saying it's win or the casualty bin.
And this is Will saying, just don't roll ones.
this is Babs saying we're going on an adventure.
That's a wrap, boys.
Are we going to mention Deadset Legends, or are we going to leave that a bit more time to stew?
Why don't we talk about the winners of Deadset Legends?
Has anyone got it written down? I think it was Babs's, wasn't it? Well, my version of for Babs of the
previous one.
We've got two to win. Yeah, Greaser Gig.
Yeah, but I haven't beaten Wilts on the last one yet, so can we give it a
No,
oh, come on, the only win I'm going to get is Babs' name beside it. I'm devastated.
Hey, you're the one that designed it in Babs' style, so you count as the winner for that.
Okay, I'll take that.
That's the win for you, because you designed it in the style you think Babs would have designed it. It was 11 degrees when I got up this morning. That was shocking.
Boo-hoo. Yeah, it was cold, but
That was freezing. That was freezing.
It's going to be 4 degrees next week.
It's Canadian summer here, and it was 9 degrees this morning when I got up.
Yo,
it's summer. No,
but it'll be 27 by the end of the day, so it's fine.
Give us a little spin.
Podcast. Happy birthday podcast.
Oh no, no, definitely not singing.
Happy
that's
birthday,
right, folks, for
down
your-
Underworld
come on.
Denizens.
Happy birthday to you.
Down Underworld Denizens discusses games, workshops, games and products such as Blood Bowl, Gutter Bowl, Dungeon Bowl and Crunch. We also discuss other fantasy football board games and concepts from other companies such as Dread Ball, Guild Ball, Grind, Elf Ball, Myth and Goal, Blitz Bowl, Chaos Ball, Monsters of the Midway and Feud Ball. We discuss products and services such as miniatures or software made by producers suitable for several of these board games. Games Workshop terms and conditions in point 2.1 state they grant the user the non-exclusive right to use their authorized intellectual property for broadcasting and other media-related activities, such as commentary and opinion pieces, blogs, and other similar informational and descriptive purposes. Down Underworld Denizens respects and honours these terms.